Welcome to Wild Turkey Science, a podcast made possible by Turkeys for Tomorrow. I'm Dr. Marcus Lashley, Professor of Wildlife Ecology at the University of Florida.
And I'm Dr. Will Goolsby, Professor of Wildlife Ecology and Management at Auburn University. We're both lifelong hunters and devoted scientists who are passionate about hunting, managing, and researching wild turkeys.
In this podcast, we'll explore turkey research, speak to the experts in the field, and address the difficult questions related to wild turkey ecology and management.
Our goal
is to serve as your connection to wild turkey science.
And we're live.
I would say alive.
I've always wanted to do that.
Here I am, about 11 pounds heavier after Thanksgiving. You know?
I'm only 6.
6? Man, you really curbed your appetite. You must only have one family to visit, or maybe y'all do it together. Is that what's going
on? No. Well, we did. We had one big family meal, and then we ate a bunch of leftovers. So, yeah. I mean, it was like multiple Thanksgiving spreads worth of meals. Yeah. But I think that probably what kind of minimized my weight gain was that I've been sick over the Iron Bowl.
Yeah, you and your dad actually went to the game, didn't you? You were in the stadium.
We were sitting.
Man, what a heartbreaker.
We were sitting like 40 rows up from where that 4th and 31 pass in the end zone was caught.
So you were right on the 31-yard line?
No. No, we were kind of in the
40 rows up on the 31 yard.
We were kind of in the corner of the end zone.
Oh, so you were at the catch.
A little bit to the side of the end zone.
Yeah.
And it was right in front of us. That the muffed punt right before it was kind of right in front of us as well.
That was terrible, man. I don't. You know, the Florida State game was a heartbreaker as well for me, but
yeah,
the Alabama Auburn game, whew,
yeah,
that was tough.
Well, you know, it's funny how you get greedy, right? Because you and I were talking earlier this morning, and I told you that Dad and I going into that game had already, talked about it, and we were just like, I hope Auburn at least just makes this a game. Yeah. And I'll be happy. But then, we were leading most of the game. Everything looked great. We were getting down there to the end. It looked like they were in an impossible situation. Muffed the punt. Then we thought, oh no, Alabama's going to score here. And then they had, that fumbled snap, and then they had a penalty, and it backed them up further and further to 4th and 31. And Dad looked at me and he was like, "It's over. It's over." And I was like, "You haven't been to enough Auburn football games."
Yeah. Well, we were talking. I was watching it with a bunch of family and friends at our deer camp. We do that every year, and we're all sitting around a campfire. We've got televisions outside where you can kind of watch different games, at the same time. But we always watching Alabama Auburn, and it's about even split, honestly, between fans. So it's a real hoot of a time, And the same thing happened. As soon as that punt was muffed, we all agreed this is over.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is, I remember saying something along the lines, I can't think of how many times I have seen Auburn muff a punt.
Yeah. Well, and, we were confused before it happened because I looked over at Dad and I was like, that's not the typical punt returner that they put in. And I haven't heard. I heard one online rumor that said that the guy that usually returns the punts was in the injury tent. So I guess they had to send somebody else out there. I don't know if that's true or not. But, what I was saying is I feel like you get greedy. We went into the game just hoping that they made it a game. But then by the end of it, we were just so devastated that we lost that I guess, we should be content.
Yeah. Well, I was the same way about the Florida game. I didn't expect it to be a really close game, and then they led like the entire game all the way into the middle of the fourth quarter or so, and then lost at the end. It wasn't as heartbreaking, I guess, as the Auburn loss, but but I look back on it. At least it was a good game.
Yeah,
like it was a close game the whole time. Like I appreciate that.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I guess the one thing I could say is like I really would like to see what the outcome of that game had been had the officiating been better. And I'm not just talking about the calls that didn't go Auburn's way, but I mean they made some bad calls for Alabama too. I
Yeah,
mean it was
or
just all
just
around
didn't
bad.
just didn't make a lot of calls.
Yeah, I mean
There were quite a few times on both sides
they were
that there
basically
was a
letting the
call
they were
that
basically
was
letting players assault referees there at the end.
trampling through. Good. Well, speaking of heartbreaks, I did a little hunting
Yeah.
over the break, and it was an exceptional uh, Thanksgiving break of hunting.
What's in
We,
season this time of year?
turkeys. No, we did see turkeys quite a few times between folks sitting on the stands, so that was much appreciated. But saw a lot of deer, multiple mature bucks. Decided to pass on one intentionally, but I had another story that I thought our audience might appreciate because it took quite a few things coming together to make this happen. But I brought my muzzle loader to sight it in, and I normally use my dad's backup rifle because I have to travel a long ways. You know, it's 8 hours to my family's land, and I already had brought a 22 for my daughter to shoot, just to try to get her into shooting, and then I had the muzzle loader, and we're bringing all the stuff and everything. So I was just like, I'll use the backup rifle, which I knew had been shot. It was zeroed, all that. You know, it wasn't anything like that. Well, my brother didn't bring his rifle. That's the thing that really got in the way. So ultimately, what happened on, I think it was Friday afternoon, day after Thanksgiving, we're all sitting around and we've realized we're a rifle short for all of us to go hunting. And so we're also down at the camp. We have more rifles where my dad lives as well, but that, you know, is a trip away from our land. So anyway, I thought I'll go to what we call the 15. I'll go to that plot because the deer, when they come out into this plot, they're going to be less than 100 yards. I could just shoot one with my muzzleloader. It won't be a problem. I'll just hunt with that. They can take the rifles. And I'll also take my oldest daughter and her cousin, my brother's daughter. They're both 7. And, you know, they really enjoy each other and playing and everything. But I like to try to get them involved in hunting. And
Mm-hmm.
I thought this will be a good opportunity. I'll take them. Well, also, I have a younger daughter my mom was supposed to come keep. She ended up being late. So we get to you know, the stand where we're going to go hunt at about 3:30 in the afternoon. So not really late,
Mm-hmm.
but we're late. And we're walking in. You can see down the road on this plot about 150, maybe 170 yards, something like that. You can see into the plot, and a lot of the deer will be feeding where you can see them, and you can sneak up and see that they're present, but you cannot get to the shooting house in this one. It's the only plot we have set up this way. Well, I really like to be able to sneak in and out with deer in the field if needed. So I'm walking around with these two girls. You know, they're not paying attention. They're picking plants, and there's a grasshopper, and you know, we see 3 or 4 tracks, and you know, we're doing the typical stuff, moseying around, and we finally get where we can see this plot 150 yards down the road from us, and I see a body kind of through the bushes, and I thought it would be fun. Let's just all I'm gonna kind of, you know, set them up that we need to be real covert here. I'm gonna get them to lay down on the road, and I kind of, you know, kneeled there behind them, and we're gonna watch this deer walk out. Well, the deer walks out, and I guessed that it's probably scoring in the low 140s. 5-year-old buck. That's what I aged him at, and he's about 50 yards farther than what I'm comfortable shooting because I have the muzzle loader. So the girls were tickled about it,
So, anyways,
but I'm
you
just sitting
shot.
here devastated. No, they did ask. They asked me. They said, "Well, why don't you shoot it, Daddy? He's big, you know." So then another mature buck, 4-year-old 8 point, that was also a really nice deer, and that's what our criteria is for that property. Is we're trying to shoot 4.5 or older, and they just come out and we just watched them for like 20-25 minutes, something like that. If the girls hadn't have been there, the way that's set up, I could have probably gotten up within 100 yards of
Mhm.
them pretty easily. But with the girls there, that's not happening.
Yeah.
But they really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
So we watched them for a while. They liked that they had to be really sneaky about it and everything, And then the deer finally cleared out where we couldn't see any of them. And I thought it would be fun for us to kind of have to sneak out. So we had
Yeah.
them sneak and, sneak on out of there. But man, it's like all the times
Yeah.
that I would have a muzzle loader and all those things happen, it would be that time that
Right.
for whatever reason the deer just decided they're going to be in the plot right in front of the house at 3:30.
Yeah. I mean, what are the odds? Yeah,
Yeah.
mine. I hunted a little bit too, and I don't have a story as dramatic as that one, but a couple funny little tidbits I'll share is on Monday last week. My wife and I took both our kids out, and my daughter sat with her, and my daughter's older. She's 8, and then my son came with me. He's 3, almost 4, and so I just want to go somewhere comfortable that he's gonna
Hmm.
enjoy himself, and we're not gonna spook too many deer. And so we ended up getting in the shooting house on this big power line that runs through the property, and I dropped my wife and daughter off at their stand first, and then we go to ours, and we're getting out and getting all my stuff together and everything like that. And then I realize in the rush to get everybody else's stuff together, I had forgotten my boots. And so typically when I
So
go
did you have to
hunting,
go in socks?
well, no, it wasn't that bad. But
I
but
did that
typically,
once as a kid.
yeah, typically, if I'm gonna wear my rubber boots, which I pretty much always wear deer hunting, and I'll wear them turkey hunting too if I know if I'm in an area where I'm gonna have to cross some water. I'll just wear my Crocs, driving back and forth because it's comfortable.
Yeah.
And hey, man, there ain't nothing wrong with Crocs. And so, I'll get there and I'll get out and I can, take my Crocs off and put my boots on. Well, I got there and I took my Crocs off, but then I didn't have any boots to put on. And so, here we go. We're going out to walk. We parked a little short of the short, short of the power line. And
Man, all kinds of things are slipping here.
yeah. And I get all my stuff. I get my backpack, and of course, it's got all Williams, toys and snacks in it and stuff, and in addition to my actual hunting gear. So it's loaded down. I put that on. I got my rifle, and we start walking out there, and we're almost to the power line. And he gets tired of walking, so he wants to ride on my shoulder. So now I've got a loaded backpack, a rifle, and a 3-year-old all on my back in Crocs, and the power line has these big chunks of gravel on it, like the big gravel that
Hmm.
you really need in highly erodible areas. And my Crocs, have seen better days, and so the soles on them are about paper thin by now. And so I'm walking with all this weight on my back across all these rocks, trying to get to the tree stand, and I feel every
plus,
single rock.
plus, you're heavier than normal because of
Yeah.
Thanksgiving.
And that too, yeah. So I got all this gravity working against my feet in these Crocs, and then we're almost to the stand, and William's been doing a pretty good job of keeping quiet, but all of a sudden he just like tells me he wants to get down, and so I'm like, fine, like I have no problem with setting you down and letting you walk a little bit. We're almost to the shooting house, and it was because there was a big old mud puddle in front of us that he wanted to jump in. So he just gets down and he screams mud and runs and jumps in the mud puddle.
Nice.
Yeah, so he got himself all
Typical.
muddy and scared anything within a 1 mile radius away.
Yeah.
But anyways, we had a good time. Didn't see anything. Surprise. And then my dad and I went out a couple times and didn't have much luck. Saw a few deer. but I saw a three-legged coyote, which that was a first for me.
Yeah, didn't you say or something with his face too?
Yeah, it looked like and through especially my PhD research and some of the stuff that I did as a postdoc, I've seen a lot of coyotes up close in traps and handled them and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And this one had the grayest, whitest face that I've ever seen. And it could have been, I didn't see him up that close. He was kind of moving through some woods, and you know how coyotes are; they hardly ever stop and
Mm-hmm.
just let you stare at them. So it could have been just like some kind of color variant, but it
Yeah.
looked really old. And I heard it coming up to my stand out of this beaver swamp that was behind where I was sitting. And I didn't pay much attention to it when I first heard it splashing because there was a bunch of wood ducks back there that had been splashing around all morning. But it kept getting closer and closer, and it was very rhythmic. And I'm getting ready. I'm thinking, that's going to be a deer. And I finally see it, and it's just this old coyote hobbling along on three legs. And I'm like, well, I'm gonna see if I can get a good look at it, and if it looks like it's actually hurt, like it's a recent injury that it's having a hard time, I might shoot it. But if it's healthy, I'm probably just not even gonna fool with it. It's probably not
Mm-hmm.
gonna make much. It won't make much of a difference, anyways. And never really got a good look at it, so I let it just kind of mosey on off and do its thing.
Mm-hmm.
But it looked fat, so
It's
it.
probably full of turkey.
Well, that's what I don't think it can be. The way that it was moving and how loud it was and how slow it probably was, it wasn't. I don't think it was running down any turkeys or deer and killing them.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe it's been filling up on the neighbors' corn piles.
We're back. You know, funny story. During my PhD research, I was sitting on stand at night, over corn piles trying to dart deer, and there were multiple occasions where. Well, let me set the stage for people. When you're on the stand at midnight and you have a bait pile out in front of you, things can sneak, especially when it's in a food plot. Things can sneak in there, and you don't even know that they're present until you hear corn cracking in
It's
their
kind of
teeth.
wild. It's
It's
kind of an
yeah,
eerie feeling.
unless it's like a full moon or something,
Yeah.
bright moon, the things will sneak in there, and you won't know they are
Oh,
present until they're
absolutely.
feeding. There were multiple times where that happened to us, and then what you do in that case, you'll already be pointing the dart rifle at the corn pile, but we'll just flip on the night vision scope that we had
Hmm.
on it to see, is this a target deer that we want to dart. There were multiple times where we flipped that switch on and it was a coyote eating the corn.
Hmm. Yeah. You
So
remember that reel that somebody sent me a while back that I reposted where there was a coyote and a possum eating together on a corn
oh
pile?
yeah, how's that work? I don't know.
So,
Yeah, well, yeah, I guess now that we have talked about hunting deer for the better part of 20 minutes, we should probably get back on to turkeys.
oh, but that was the other thing. I had to text you on Friday morning from that same stand that I saw that coyote from because those turkeys were gobbling.
Oh yeah. See, isn't that something?
Yeah.
Once we did that, I don't know if I've told you, but now that's Alabama. I did not hear any gobbling, unfortunately, but in Tennessee, we had a lot of gobbling on that hunt early. And
Yeah.
then someone from Kentucky also reached out after that last episode and said that they had them gobbling. In fact,
Yeah.
sent me a video and said turn the volume up, and it was a turkey's gobbling in the background.
Hmm.
So I like it. I
Yeah.
like it.
It gives you a little taste of spring,
Yeah,
little
I'm
something,
about it.
little
I'll
something
go
to
sit on the
carry
deer
you over.
stand just to hear that,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, for sure.
So, well, I know you've been working on some stuff, and I know you recently had a grad student present some work. So I was wondering, maybe we could start there and talk about what you have going on,
Hmm.
and then maybe we can talk about what's coming,
Yeah.
because both of us are preparing for some turkey projects,
Hmm.
field season. So I thought, given we get questions about that a lot, that might be a really good thing for us to cover here.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so the presentation that you're talking about was at a conference called, we refer to it as CFA or CAFWA, depending on I
Yeah.
guess what your advisor called it coming up in grad school. I always called it
Sometimes your
CFWA.
advisor sometimes your advisor changes on you.
Yeah, they do. They do.
I
I've
was
been
I always called it CFA as well, and now both of my graduate advisors that I learned that from call it CFA.
Yeah, I feel like they've
So
been trying to rebrand it as CAFWA for whatever reason. Maybe that's, I don't
I
know.
think there's a silent F in it, and it's just it's throwing people off.
But it stands for the Southeastern Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies. It's an acronym, and there. So each region of the United States has its own Fish and Wildlife Association. Ours is
Hmm.
CAFWA, and they're all under this parent body, AFWA, which is the American Fish and Wildlife Association.
Hmm.
And essentially, what this is it's a place for all these different state wildlife agencies to come together each year and just talk about what they're doing and what's working and
Hmm.
what's not working, and to communicate, collaborate, share ideas, all that kind of thing. And one part of it is that they have time for research presentations. So a lot of
Yeah.
times our
Some
graduate students end up going.
Yeah, no, and often those presentations are paired with a peer-reviewed publication
Right.
through their journal.
Yes. Yep.
But a really good forum for applied research, because a lot of the policymakers and land managers and wildlife managers in these different states are present.
That's right.
So it's a good forum to have direct communication from
Yeah.
research to manager.
And oftentimes those agency biologists want the work that they're involved with, in collaboration with the university, presented to other states so that those other states can
Yeah.
kind of see what they're doing.
Hmm.
But so Kevin Ostrander is my master's student that went to present there on some of his turkey stuff this year, and it's stuff that you guys have heard us talk about on the air before. His master's is focusing on looking at gobbler fertility. Got a few jakes in there as well. We didn't get the sample size of jakes that we wanted to. But he assessed 417 fertility in 417 adult males, and aka gobblers, longbeards, toms, whatever you
Hmm.
call them. And we only had 9 jakes, but we're also using a subset of turkeys from that sample. The actual sample was over 900 total birds. And so we
Hmm.
had different birds that we could allocate to different causes depending on the condition that they were in when they were brought to us, and various other factors that I won't bore you
So
with.
So you didn't test the fertility on all 900 and
That's
something. That
right.
was just okay.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so what criteria? It just needed to have the
It
testes in good shape when you got them, or
Yeah,
like
that's
what?
part of it, and how the bird had been handled, and like what
Okay,
kind
like
of,
how old it was
yeah,
or something.
tissue necrosis and all that kind of stuff that can happen.
Yeah.
Um
Well, so re- correct me if I'm wrong, but for the audience, when they heard about it, didn't we give an Alabama update
yes.
where you went through some of this? But at that time, you only had like the weights of the testes or something, right?
That's right. That's right.
And now you've gone farther and have more or better data, I guess,
Yeah,
more precise estimates of fertility.
so briefly, for our first cut at looking at fertility, we relied on some literature, a
Hmm.
previously published paper that had kind of done the same thing, but they also did some microscopic examination of those tissues, and they were basically looking at whether or not um, the testicle was, had evidence of spermatogenesis. What was it actually producing sperm? And they correlated that with the weight, and they found that there were these 3 different weight categories, and at the lowest weight, that those birds were pretty much never producing sperm, and then the middle category, they sometimes were, sometimes weren't, and in the upper
Hmm.
category they always were. And so that's kind of what we're using to draw some of those preliminary conclusions, but we've taken it a
So
step further by
yeah, and
working.
those
Go ahead.
preliminary, based on those criteria, you're what was it, 90 something percent, or
Hmm.
wasn't it
Yeah.
90%?
Yeah.
I can't remember the exact number,
Ninety
but I thought
percent, 90% either were definitely or probably producing sperm. And
based
the
on the
reason
weight.
Right, based on the weight. And the
Yeah.
reason that we're interested in this is this relates to that whole question about, are we killing birds that are more fertile or that are more capable of fertilizing clutches early in the season?
Mhm.
And this relates to that whole social aspect of, breeding behavior and breeding ecology in wild turkeys. And so we took that a step further beyond just weighing the testes, and we worked with a histopathologist here on campus that works in the College of Veterinary Medicine, Dr. Kelly Joyner. And she was essentially able to help us come up with a new technique to quantify fertility in dead birds.
Mhm.
Because the gold standard of determining breeding soundness in poultry requires live birds. Obviously, we didn't have that. So what we did is,
It's hard to test fertility in a live wild turkey? Is that what you're saying?
well, step one, you got to get your hands on them, and then step two,
Yeah,
we'll leave
I
the
can
rest of
see where that might be.
the yeah, we'll leave the rest of the steps to the imagination. But apparently, I'm going to learn about that too here in a couple years. So I'll
Yeah.
go into that in just a second. But um, so we took a cross section, just like a thin section of the testes from each of these birds, and you put it on a microscope slide and you stain it, basically dye it, and then you can look at it under a microscope, and you can actually look at the seminiferous tubules and the spermatozoa inside those seminiferous tubules that house the sperm, basically.
Mhm.
And so we can look at the percent of the area within each of those tubules. Just think of it as a pipe, right? There's
Mhm.
all these pipes, and if you think about like if you cut through like trying to think of a good example, like a cable that's made of many individual cables, it
Mhm.
kind of looks like that. Looking on it
It's like
on
a
end.
cable that has a whole bunch of wires rolled up.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so each one of those individual wires is a seminiferous tubule. And then within that seminiferous tubule, you can look at the area that is producing sperm, where there are actually sperm within that tube. Okay.
Mhm.
And so we're using that percent spermatozoa in each tubule to basically develop an index of how fertile that bird is. And it just intuitively, you would think that if the average percent of the area within that pipe that is occupied by sperm is 5% versus 10%, that the 10% bird would be more fertile than the 5% bird, right? So
Mhm.
this is an attempt at achieving greater resolution in the fertility data compared to just looking at weights.
Mhm. Well, and the weight, and please correct me when I'm wrong, not if I'm wrong, but when I'm wrong, because you're the one uh, gaining expertise in this, not me.
Gaining not achieved.
I was careful with my wording there. I know it seems like I just, spit stuff out, but sometimes there's a filter between my noggin and this mouth. uh, so, based on the previous work, that was, from what I recall you telling me, that the weight was based on a 0 or 1, right? It either was
Yeah.
fertile or it was not.
Yeah, so with the weight, when they established those weight criteria, they essentially did kind of the same thing that we did with the microscope. It was just they looked at it and they said, "Oh, there are sperm or there are not sperm." And
Right.
then they looked at what it weighed.
Which would make sense why a large portion of the birds would be fertile based on that
Mhm.
criteria. That just means they do have sperm.
Mhm. Yeah.
But what you're doing now, where you're counting the proportion of the pipes, whatever you call them, the tubules,
Yeah.
uh, you are getting more like a continuous
Yes.
variable. So in other words, you can see how fertile they are compared to one another.
Yes. Yes. And to relate that to the importance of what you just talked about with the just the binary quantification, the sperm present, sperm absent. Um, we have actually found that none of our adult birds were not producing sperm.
Yeah.
So, I mean, 100% were producing sperm,
So
but there's variation.
that criteria is not very helpful in establishing the relative fertility of birds when all of them do some, right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah,
Or almost all of them.
it wouldn't be very informative to put it into any kind of analysis because they're all
Yeah.
fertile based on those grounds, right?
Right, right. But
Um,
this one, you could have one that averages 1%, then one that's 99%, and in the old criteria, you'd assign those the same value.
yeah, that's right.
But in yours, you'd have a gradient in
Yeah,
fertility. Whether or not that actually is the outcome, I guess, in nature is a different question. Like how much sperm
that's
do they need to produce
right,
before they would fertilize a clutch?
right.
It may not be 99%. There may be
That's
very little difference between 33 and 66 even. We don't
yeah.
really know that, right?
So that's what we don't know, and so like just to add to this, like most of our birds were somewhere in the 6 to 7% range. Okay.
Mhm.
So you got a lot of space there and just a few sperm in it. I mean, this is a large tubule. Sperm are very small. And we don't know, say, what is the breeding soundness? That's the term that the histopathologist uses. So I'll just use it to sound smart. Um,
The soundness.
this breeding soundness.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
So
use
we
that about acorns all the time.
okay.
The soundness of the
The soundness, but not the breeding soundness. We got acorns running around rutting on, on each other. So, anyways, we don't know what the actual, how that translates into breeding soundness if you have a 6% bird compared to an 8% bird, right?
Mhm.
And I'm working on something right now, and it looks like we're going to be able to get our hands on live wild turkeys, much smaller sample. We're not going to have hundreds of these, but maybe tens of these that we can actually quantify breeding soundness in the live bird, sacrifice the bird, and then do the same procedure that we did and see how well that percentage correlates with their
Mhm.
breeding soundness based on that gold standard of having the live bird and the semen from it.
Mhm.
Okay. But one just like gee whiz interesting observation that I'll throw out there before I get into some of the other little bit of preliminary stuff that I'm willing to share at this point is that the histopathologist was surprised, or I guess she wasn't as surprised as I was, because she sees this all the time. She's necropsied and looked at tissue examinations in everything from a basic Labrador Retriever up to an elephant, that died in a zoo. She's seen and done it all, and she's awesome to work with. But she noticed that there were some of them, and I've got all the notes in here in the Excel file that she sent us after going through all these.
Mhm.
But there were males that were showing basically what would be commonly referred to as reproductive senescence, where they started to see some fibrosis and some lipid deposits forming throughout the testes that would be associated with aging and decreased fertility that comes along with that. So I was kind of surprised to hear that.
That is interesting. I don't even know what to think about it. Like the turkeys getting too old to breed,
Possibly. I mean, I don't think
or
it's
maybe
too old to
there's
breed, or just that maybe it wouldn't be as fertile as it would have been a
yeah.
couple years ago.
Yeah, but that's pretty remarkable that I mean, how many birds do you have that are more than 5 years old even?
Who knows?
Probably not very many.
Yeah.
Would be my guess.
Right.
So to start seeing signs of aging, unless there's other things like environmental contaminants or something that's influencing that.
Hmm.
Like I guess there could be other things than age, is what I'm
Yeah.
saying. But um, that is pretty wild.
Yeah. It is. So I'm glad you brought up the environmental contaminants thing, because that is one thing that we're looking at. So we're not just looking at are they fertile, are they not. We wanted to look at differences in jakes and gobblers, which there's an obvious difference there, but that's been established. So that's kind of just like first cut gee whiz type stuff. you're looking at about a 7.4% index versus a 1.9% on average for gobblers versus jakes. So it's significant. There's a lot of difference
Okay.
there. But we only had
So there's
9.
four. So there's four. The index is 4 times as high for the adults as the.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, as you would expect. But within the adult category, we can look at things like, because we're doing pesticide exposure testing. We're looking
Now,
at
what is there any
disease.
particular pesticide that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'll get back to it in just a second. But we're
Okay.
looking at that, and we're looking at how fertility correlates with disease. For each bird, we actually have hunter observation data. So we can say, how did the bird come in and what was it doing? How was it acting? What did it respond to? And look at how that correlates with fertility. So can we see that there are certain behaviors that are associated with more fertile birds? Strutting, for instance, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot that we can unpack, using this fertility index. But to answer your question, the specific pesticides that we're going to be looking at are these neonicotinoids that are commonly, these systemic pesticides that everybody's been
Mm-hmm.
hearing a lot about, that are oftentimes applied as a seed coat to corn and various other agronomic crops.
Mm-hmm. So you also have the diet, right? Did you say that already?
Yes, we will have the
So,
diet, but
so you'll know what was in the crop at the time that was
we
harvested.
will.
But
I
a
don't
lot of them
know. I
probably
don't
didn't
know
have anything.
if that's going to be very informative, right? Because a lot of these birds obviously are shot early in the morning before they've eaten much. So
Yeah, makes sense. Well, I don't know. It was. I'll just be honest with you with where I went with the testes marbling. Sounds like you got some testes marbling, and when we want to marble a nice steak, we finish a cow on corn. you know,
oh,
just
that's where
saying.
of course that's where your
You got
mind
some
initially
testes
went.
marbling.
Yeah,
Well, no, I'm just thinking of
that's corn
we've got
finished.
lots of. Well, we just have so many hypotheses out there, and you can address
Yeah,
in many ways things that we haven't addressed about many of those hypotheses.
yeah,
I,
for
I
sure.
think that's really cool. It
Um,
also sounds like the most sciencey stuff I've ever heard of related to turkeys. Everybody thinks scientists, they're thinking white lab coat with the petri dish and the little, the little, uh, the little dropper thing. I can't think of the name
a
of it.
pipette.
Pipette, yes.
Damn it,
Yeah.
Marcus, you're a
So,
biologist. Come on.
uh, yeah, everybody thinks of scientists as that, and usually I'm like, that's actually not what I do at all. But that actually is what you do. You just sit around and look at cells through a microscope.
Well, I
So,
don't. To be clear.
yeah, but you
Uh,
do wear the white lab coat.
I don't own a white lab coat.
Oh man,
I'll put
that's
one on if
awesome.
you want me to.
Yeah, you know what we need? We need some camo lab coats.
There you go. Mossy Oak, make that happen for us. Bottom line.
Yeah.
but but yeah, I really don't have much else to share on that right now. There's some interesting stuff. I will leave you in the audience with this teaser. Um, at first cut, we have seen some interesting correlations between behavior and the fertility index.
Hmm.
So I'll leave it at that.
So basically, what the turkeys were observed doing and how that turned out in terms of their own
Yeah,
fertility index.
yeah.
Okay,
But there
we
are
we're going to be sitting on the edge of our seats here.
well, the reason, and I want to be clear and fair to our listeners, the reason I don't want to share that information right now is that I want to make sure that what we're seeing is, and especially the way that we're quantifying fertility, is a accurate representation of fertility before I go on to say anything further than that that could potentially in any way influence the way we manage these birds.
Yeah, I can. stand behind that. That's what we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah,
Yeah. So in other words, you want to see, does it matter if it's 7 or 9
that's right.
index?
Yeah,
If that doesn't matter, then it's a moot point.
that's
But
right.
if it does matter, then things that influence that index over that spectrum
Could
could matter.
matter as well. Yes.
Yeah, that's good.
Um,
So, but it is,
one,
I mean, the data itself is just really remarkable. I love the entire story of it
yeah.
too. That it's all being hunter driven. Like
Hmm.
people are donating their samples. The enormity of effort that
Yeah.
took and collaboration amongst the community. I think that's pretty special. And look at all of the great data that you're getting out of it.
Yeah, and it's being entirely funded by nonprofit conservation organizations.
Yeah,
Alabama Wildlife Federation, Turkeys for Tomorrow, and Alabama chapter of NWTF.
yeah. So three primary players in turkey conservation for sure.
Right.
Two of them completely focused on turkey
That's right.
conservation.
That's right.
So that's really really awesome. I love that.
So the other thing that we're doing with all those birds that I've talked about before is we're testing each of them for histaminiasis, blackhead, which is the one that people a lot of times think about being associated with chicken litter from chicken houses.
Mm-hmm.
And then LPDV, which is lymphoproliferative disease virus, which is the one that everybody's talking about, in the context of turkeys right now, because there have been some findings come out from different parts of the South that show that prevalence rates as high as 50%, like in North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
Don't have any LPDV results to share yet, but the good news is on the histaminiasis, the blackhead front, we only had 3 birds that were positive, and that is in comparison to a total sample of 367 birds total that were tested for that disease. So 3 out of 367. And you can't run an analysis on that related to fertility because it's only 3 birds versus 364 birds that were negative.
Mm-hmm.
But those 3 birds, I will say, on average, they were way below the average for healthy birds.
Hmm.
The disease was affecting their fertility rate as we measured it.
But it was only 3.
It was only 3.
Darn.
So
Man, that's good information though.
it's
You know,
weird
it's
because
a
I
good
don't want to.
anecdote at this point, but
It
it tells
is,
us we should probably be looking.
it is. But so what's going to be really interesting, and I excited is probably not the right word, but because I don't want any turkeys to have any disease, right? None of us do.
Mm-hmm.
But we're expecting high prevalence rates with LPDV. So that means I'll have a lot larger sample to look at in terms of correlations between that disease and fertility.
Mm-hmm.
And it may be even a more important one to look at than histaminiasis because it is so prevalent across the Southeast. So if it is influencing fertility, that's of concern.
Mm-hmm. No doubt. No doubt. I did think of one thing uh, from our side. I do have some. I don't have any preliminary results, but there is something that I didn't share in the Florida update when we had Buddy Welch on.
Mhm.
Uh, or I don't think that I did. I don't think that we had gotten this all worked out at the time, but another hunter contribution study, we have uh, feathers from various parts of Florida that we are collecting or that we've already gotten that we are using to do some genetics work on turkeys across Florida. And the idea behind that is really to look at is starting to get at a really important question that's related to habitat connectivity.
Mhm.
And this is sort of our first go at it where we're going to do a lot of genetics work to try to see, uh, how habitat connectivity is affecting gene flow and the genetic viability of populations. So
Yeah.
that work is being done. I don't know that much about it
So they're
because
so
James
hunters are just
Austin.
donating feathers?
I think that they were collected at check stations. We have check
Mhm.
stations in a bunch of management areas,
Yeah.
and I think hunters that were lucky enough to harvest a bird gave a feather. in some of those places.
Mhm.
And this has been over the past several years. At first, FWC was doing it, and then they added that on to our ongoing turkey project to uh, to do some genetics work to start to get at this habitat question of how connectivity affects population genetics.
Yeah, that's really cool. And, you know, especially thinking about some of the stuff that we're learning about landscape composition for turkeys and, you know, with
Hmm.
all the fragmentation in Florida, that should be like ground zero for testing, you know,
Yeah.
hypotheses related to that aspect of the landscape.
Well, there's so much development pressure here, but also one thing that I find remarkable about Florida, and that I think this will be really informative just in general to turkeys and what they're facing, is we have all of that development pressure, but we also have this enormous effort from a variety of organizations to conserve what's called the Florida Wildlife Corridor.
Mhm.
And it was even an act, we have an act now from the Florida state legislator appropriating funds to help through that mission. And if you look, folks can Google this and we can link it in our show notes. But the Florida Wildlife Corridor, if you go online and look at that, it's pretty remarkable. Like, I would have never thought something like that was in Florida, but it's basically undeveloped land all the way from the Everglades down the very southern part of the state through the spine all the way up to Georgia, and then another path going across the Panhandle,
Yeah.
and it's mostly intact.
Yeah.
And that's pretty remarkable, and I think it's a unique opportunity to understand how that connectivity is affecting the population
Mhm.
viability, because we have a lot of places that are really fragmented too, and we're getting turkeys from both places. So I'm really excited about that. But
Yeah, I wonder with
James
some of the
Austin is our wildlife geneticist here and on faculty, and he's handling all the genetics part. I don't have that expertise, but
right.
I'm involved since it's wild turkey related.
Right.
So
You know, I wonder if as we start to talk more and more about, you know, these certain toxins that turkeys are potentially um, you know, unintentionally exposed to, whether or not that could be something that could come in later on down the road as far as like having that feather repository and looking for, you know, whether some of that stuff is detectable within the feathers.
mhm.
Be
That's
interesting
a
to think
good
about
point. I
too.
wonder how long it would be stored in feathers, because we have another resource through uh, what do they call them? The reference collections. I'm trying to think of at museums.
Yeah.
Uh,
It is a reference
what?
collection, right?
Yeah, what? There's a term for it, and I'm missing the term right now.
Repository?
No, that's not it. Uh, anyway, we have historical collections of feathers from all over the place of
Yeah.
turkeys in all these museums. We could, if that's something in there, we could potentially see how something like toxin concentration in feathers has changed over time.
Yeah, that'd be super cool.
Yeah, lots of really cool avenues. But so yeah, also we're kind of right in the middle right now of getting prepared. In fact, we only have about a week and a half from when we're recording before we're going to be actively in the field trying to capture turkeys.
Mhm.
So we're ramping up. We have plans to catch 60 hens and put GPS tags on them, and
Nice.
30 toms as well.
So what
So
goes into that? What are y'all thinking about right now and preparing and all that stuff?
yeah, it really is a massive ordeal. There's a few people that are employees of FWC. There's also me, and I'm really more of an administrator in my role as the faculty member. The graduate students are the ones that are really doing a lot of the legwork, especially in the field.
Mhm.
But we have been ordering tags and trying to hire technicians to support the projects. Uh, getting our field equipment prepared. We are
Buying corn.
looking at different sites. We haven't done that yet. But one thing that we'll start doing in early December, as soon as we can get access to some of the sites, is especially on public land, it's really sensitive because of you have to bait them to get them to come into a net.
Hmm.
You can't do that when it's not legal to bait during hunting season. So we're having to wait, on those those issues. But yeah, we're gearing up for where the people are going to stay. I mean, it's a real ordeal just trying to get all of the logistics in
Hmm.
order. And all of this is hours south of where I live and where the
Yeah.
graduate students live and where the people from the FWC live. So, that's quite the ordeal. Trying to get permits lined up because we have to get permits to do these things from various entities, especially
Hmm.
this project. We have the ARUs, the sound recorders.
Yeah.
We now have access to 6 pairs of sites, and they're paired based on hunting and not hunting.
Hmm.
So we'll have recorders on uh, a hunted and unhunted population replicated 6 times,
That's nice.
which is pretty incredible. Most of the work that we've done, like we've talked about ad nauseum, we lack the replication. We ended
Hmm.
up we end up having to do the same study over and over again to try to get at some of those questions. So that should be really useful data, to figure out how hunting influences gobbling activity and the timing of gobbling and that sort of thing. Uh, Yeah, so it's a pretty massive ordeal, and then once you get to feeding, you have to pick sites that you can, establish a net and safely shoot it, and it's got to be a place that turkeys use, and we can go on, but we also have to simultaneously maintain a whole bunch of those sites and kind of
Hmm.
watch them,
Yeah.
over 2 study areas where we're capturing that are an hour and a half or so apart from one
Yeah.
another even.
Yeah.
So a lot is going on. Another thing that uh, I'm not sure if you've been doing this, but I really rely a lot on donations and do some fundraising type stuff. And I've been doing various things trying to uh, get enough funding to support another internship so that they can work across these projects. I don't think we talk about this enough, but one of the problems that we're facing in our discipline is that a lot of our students are no longer from rural backgrounds. They didn't grow up hunting, and we have a lot of students that don't get that much interaction with game species or game species research, and we end up with not very many people in wildlife biologist positions that
Hmm.
have that kind of experience and appreciation for the role hunting is playing in conservation.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, we talked about multiple projects even today from both of us that are dependent on hunting and hunters, participating in it. So that's one thing that I've kind of felt uh, is really important in our
Yeah.
role is hiring these interns that get a lot of experience with game species like turkeys
Yeah.
and deer, particularly with me. So that's another thing we are trying to get enough funds to support an additional intern, and we've been, getting various donations to support that, and I think we're going to make it this year so that we can
Nice.
have an additional position. So that's why we're linking these accounts in different places. That's what those funds go toward, that
Hmm.
kind of thing. So I think it's pretty important that we provide those opportunities,
Yeah.
since a lot of the students I interact with now don't have any hunting experience,
Yeah.
and at least through this research, they're getting experience with game species.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, several years ago, I used to teach a freshman wildlife class, and I pulled that class. It was about 100 students at a time at that time, and I feel like it was around 40% of them said that they had hunted at least once in the past 5 years, which is a
Hmm.
pretty low bar to cross,
Yeah, we're
and
far
that's a
lower.
that's at Auburn in Alabama, in a relatively
Mhm.
rural state.
Yeah,
It's my guess is that Mississippi State would probably be kind of the same way.
I think
Um,
so. Based
but
on
then
my
as
experience as faculty member and student there, it's
right,
probably around that.
but then as you
Maybe a
get
little bit higher.
into like some of these more developed states, like
Mhm.
Georgia and Florida, my guess is that that percentage is much lower.
Ours is definitely lower than that. I don't know
Yeah.
what the percentage is, but they're I mean, I don't interact with very many students. It's a fairly low proportion that have ever hunted, not
Hmm.
just in the last 5 years, but never having done it.
Yeah.
A lot of them are interested in it, and
Right.
I've been participating in a variety of programs trying to provide those opportunities. And a lot of our students, as college students, become a hunter or
Hmm.
engage in hunting
Yeah.
through those opportunities. I've been working with Delta Waterfowl to do a waterfowl hunt down in South Florida each year the past 2 years, and we have a deer hunt, a turkey hunt, and various things, to provide opportunities. But yeah, I feel like that's something that we really need to focus on because it's definitely changing,
Hmm.
and any students that we can get engaged and appreciate the hunting that are going to be managers eventually or researchers eventually.
Yeah.
Uh, any of them that we can influence, I think is a good thing for us to try to do that.
Yeah. And I mean,
But
at that and that builds on itself, right? Because
hmm
you know those students will, a certain subset of them will eventually go on to manage wildlife management areas, or even like run entire state agencies, or they may
hmm
go into academia and they become, the next
yeah,
generation of faculty. And if you don't have people that are passionate about the wild turkey resource, then they're not going to pay much attention to it, and they're
yeah,
not going to put much effort into it. So I think it's important to try to catch them early on,
hmm
and try to introduce these opportunities that could potentially influence a resource like wild turkeys, at a very large level later on down the road.
hmm Well, I think yeah, same to be said. Take kids hunting.
Yeah,
Take the opportunity. We're losing that enthusiasm at a population level, and that's important. And that's why we both took it upon ourselves to try to get some kids in the deer woods this past week.
that's right.
So I think that's really important. But well, I know you're preparing for a very different kind of project coming up. So
Yeah.
what's going on with you?
Can you remember if I've talked about this one on the air before?
I don't think so.
Okay.
We're just
So,
gonna assume that no one listening right now has ever listened before. I'm not
okay.
sure how well we're retaining audience.
Yeah.
I think we've got a lot of people listening because they think it's about the country turkey and they listen one time.
I think they're, never mind. So, I think everybody, I think a lot, we've got a core group of listeners now, which we don't
Yeah.
have any metrics on that, but I choose to believe that, especially this time of year, it may not be the case as much once deer season's over and people's minds are starting to turn to turkeys and they break their calls out of the closet. But um, during this time of year, I feel like it's a lot of dedicated folks listening, and I think I bring that up because I think they'll appreciate that this project was in part listener inspired. And specifically when we went through the habitat management series, which we talk about habitat management all the time, but I feel like there was a there was a period of time there where we focused very intensively on it. Um, we did an episode on I don't own the land, how can I manage it, and options for leaseholders and things like that.
Mm-hmm. That
And
was a popular one.
yeah, and that was followed up by a lot of listener questions that were submitted to us in various formats about, what can I do on this timber company land that I lease, et cetera, et cetera. You can
Mm-hmm.
imagine. Or maybe they're a landowner, but they're just in an area that doesn't have burn friendly law, or they're next to smoke sensitive areas that prevent them from burning or something like that. And so that was partially the genesis of this project, and we're going to be looking at it's my current master's student, Kevin Ostrander, that I mentioned earlier, the student in the fertility and the disease work. He's decided that he wants to do a significant shift from his master's to his PhD, obviously doing the very technical lab codey thing that you were talking about earlier.
The marbled testes
Yeah,
to
yeah, looking at
hardcore
testes
habitat.
marbling to going into hardcore habitat. And so what we're going to be doing is, are you finished?
I bet you never thought that we would be on marble testes during this episode. Nobody out there thought that. I've been holding that one.
I'm seeing a
Actually,
trend. I'm seeing a trend here where I'm the one that works with the parts of the animals that nobody else wants to work with. I'm just going to carve out a career.
Yeah. Have you fed any turkeys a glove to see what happens?
No, but you can blow up a glove and make it into a turkey as a craft project.
Oh man!
You know, speaking of which, I found another use for turkey decoys.
Oh,
yeah, I pulled
go
out.
on.
I had this old foam hen in my closet. Okay, and like the Walmart special. You know what? You know exactly what I'm talking about.
Oh yeah.
And,
I've never owned one, but I know what you're talking about.
Okay, high and mighty.
I'm not trying to be high and mighty. I just have never owned one. I don't know why that's high and mighty.
Like when you were growing up, did y'all have like a kids table and an adults table at Thanksgiving?
Oh yeah, we still do.
Okay. So we set up.
I'm still at the kids table.
all of our kids were old enough this year to finally sit at the table by themselves together. So we set one up, and we hosted at my house this year. And I put that old foam hen out there as the centerpiece on the kids' table.
Oh man!
But
it'd have been funny if it was a Jake. That's the Jake's table.
Yeah, that would have been more appropriate, I guess. Or you could look at it as the mother hen was watching over, you know, because we were eating at one table and they're kind of over in the other room eating. But anyway, so I wanted to get some answers for these folks that can't burn, but I also wanted to get answers for people that can burn. So we've designed this pretty cool experiment where we're going to be looking at managing understory in pine plantations, because that's most relevant to, you know, folks in Alabama and throughout the Southeast where we reside. And looking at how various herbicides with or without fire, and then also how disking and winter mowing even influence uh, a variety of things, but particular to turkeys, we're going to be primarily looking at brooding cover. Because we keep finding again and again, and those of you that listen are well acquainted with the fact that we're lacking brooding cover across the landscape.
Yeah.
So we're going to be looking at the interaction with fire and these various herbicides, and that'll be of relevance to managers that can use fire. And then we're also going to be looking at these herbicide treatments as well as disking during the wintertime and mowing during the wintertime, and seeing how that influences vegetation structure and species composition relative to turkeys.
That will be really useful. And we got plenty of pines, not enough brooding cover, and plenty of folks out there that are willing and able to use a mower or a disc.
Yeah.
And maybe not willing or not able to use fire. So
right.
Having that relative comparison. And it also might be quite interesting. I think I know how it would shake out, but it might be interesting to see how much are you gaining out of fire comparatively. So
yeah,
that's really useful.
Yep. So I'm looking forward to it. We're going to be measuring a bunch of things in all of these stands. So I'm not going to go into that level of detail today, but I'm really looking forward to it. And I think I have you and several other. I think between you and then interfacing more with the public, through this podcast and through social media, providing information and research updates there, it's really taken me from being more of this black and white thinker on habitat management and being like, oh, well, you can't burn. You just don't want it bad enough. Like, you got to find a way to burn, like, this is the way, this is the only way. Burn.
You
and
ain't got
now,
no fire in your belly. That's what
yeah,
my
that's right.
granddaddy would have said.
And now I'm taking it a more nuanced approach, and maybe some of it's coming with age too, but I'm thinking, man, like maybe it is that fire, gives you the best response, right? In some certain scenario, not just
Hmm.
fire isn't just good in and of itself. I don't want to, you know, mistakenly have people believe that, but maybe fire combined with some herbicide creates the best brooding cover for turkeys that we possibly could, as far as we know, right?
Hmm.
But if they can go mow one time a year or one time every 2 years during wintertime, so you're not getting a bunch of thatch build up and things like that. You're not just encouraging, the grass to get really dense or anything like that. But that results in a 20% improvement compared to what fire does. Maybe fire plus some
Hmm.
herbicide is like 100% the best we could do, but it gets you a fifth of the way there. We're moving the needle for turkeys,
Yeah.
and I think that's
Especially
what's important.
if you tell people that you're getting something out of mowing, everybody's going to jump on the tractor.
Yeah,
Not everybody will do that for drip tours.
that's
We
right.
got plenty of folks that will, and
Yeah,
I'm appreciative of those folks.
yeah,
But I kind of I'm definitely changing like you are. I'm realizing the absolute supreme best response possible is not always what people are willing or want to do,
hmm,
and we need to take it where we can get it. And if you can
that's
get
right.
a few more turkeys by doing something that's more marginal, as opposed to just not doing anything, then we should take it.
Yeah, I mean, just think about it in terms of what if we can influence tens of thousands of acres with fire, but we can influence hundreds of thousands or millions with some other technique?
Hmm.
If it's only 20% as good as what we could achieve with fire, but we're achieving it at orders of magnitude greater scale,
Hmm.
then we net more turkeys.
Yeah, that's what
And
it's
I'm not
about.
saying, and
What
I'm
are you
not trying
netting?
to like project my outcome, but this is important stuff that we need to know and
Yeah,
understand and be able to share with people that may not have all the tools available to them in the toolbox.
right. Yeah, we've talked about another idea that is brewing, and we have a lot of folks in the research community that are really interested in trying to take some work like what you're doing and then apply it at scales that we can measure vital rate responses of turkeys. So you can't do that necessarily in your
Yeah,
study and
right,
that's pretty typical of habitat work. We
right.
know we have a good idea of what turkeys need, and then we see if the plant community responds in a way that benefits their needs. But it's a different thing altogether to do it at a scale in which you could measure how turkeys
A
actually
demographic
respond.
response. Yeah,
Yeah, and I think that's important, and we are working on trying to put something like that together. And there's a lot of researchers that are really interested in doing that. So that's exciting, that to see this habitat work coming to fruition. I think what you're doing is an obvious need, a next step from what some of the previous work that's been done
hmm,
by both of us and many others. Um, but also taking that to the next level to address that larger question
yeah,
that we kind of belabored during the habitat session.
yeah,
That we really need to connect these practices to an expected outcome
yeah.
demographically for turkeys. So
That's right.
yeah,
So we're not there
really good.
yet, but there are glimmers of hope on the horizon.
Yeah, I think
On the
long
horizon,
term
we'll say.
that is a long term goal of mine and yours and a bunch of other researchers that we want to do that study.
Yeah.
So I'm
All
excited
all of
to
which have
see.
been on this show,
Oh yeah, yeah,
coincidentally.
yep, every single one.
And there's a lot of organizations that are interested in getting behind that too. So
Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
this
I,
momentum that is building right now to try to get some of these answers that are important to turkeys is very encouraging and exciting.
yeah. Well, I think we have belabored that point, but it's worthy of saying it again. We've rallied. Matter of fact, one thing did you see the article that came out? They actually
I meant to bring that up.
There actually was a hot link of this podcast linked in a New York Times article
Yeah,
over Thanksgiving,
we've
and
made it.
they wrote an article. They interviewed Coulter Chitwood, one of our next few guests that's coming on, Andy Little from Nebraska,
Yep.
was interviewed, and I was interviewed by a reporter for the New York Times. And I think actually the quote that he took from me is that we have rallied behind this bird
Mm-hmm.
as a group. That's what
Yeah.
reminded me of it, because that's the quote he took from me.
If
Uh,
there's nothing else that anyone, because New York Times probably has a bigger readership than anybody, I would guess. But
Yes,
um,
one of the biggest newspapers on the planet. I
if
don't know what the readership is, but
folks
there's
get nothing else from that article than the fact that hunters are the main ones rallying behind this bird, then I think
yeah.
it's a success. But does this mean that we can now say that we're an award-winning and New York Times best-selling podcast? Wait, no, I don't
I
think
don't
it
think
works
that.
that way.
No,
New
no,
York
that's not
Times.
how it works.
How about New York Times featured podcast?
Maybe so.
Featured in the New York Times.
You know,
Wild Turkey Sunday.
I was looking at the metrics. We might have picked up a few ephemeral, we'll call them ephemeral listeners from that New York Times article.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, I think they probably turned it on and was like, "What in the heck?
yeah.
Who are these Southern idiots?" And I thought this was about science. These guys are definitely not wearing lab coats.
Yeah, I picked up a few more followers on my Instagram page, after that article came out. But for some reason, they were all women and they were all wearing bathing suits.
Is that what happened? Oh, I don't think those are real.
You know what I'm talking? All the trolls. Or, is it a troll account or a
Yeah,
spam bot account?
yeah, something like that. Well, we can link that article. I shared it on social media. It was pretty wild. You want to think of like top 30 things that I've never thought I would do. One of those would have probably been be interviewed for an article in the New York Times, especially about turkeys. But I do think that shows you. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of interest with turkeys around Thanksgiving, and a lot of people that even
Hmm.
don't turkey hunt are thinking about turkey. But this is enough of a concern, and there's enough of a wave that it is reaching mainstream media,
Yeah,
and I think that's important. Uh, you know, and the message in that article was certainly that we have rallied behind turkeys and that hunters have been driving the rally. Not only it also was a point that was really strongly made. They didn't quote me, but I did talk about this when I was being interviewed. The reason that we have turkeys to rally behind is because of hunters to begin with. So, a lot of key things over the years happened to lead to the restocking and you know abundance of turkeys to be concerned about. So I think that was an important message to get out. So I'm glad that
absolutely.
happened. But never can tell.
Well, cool. You got anything else?
No, I think that's all. We're trying to stay on track. We've got some really awesome guests lined up for the next few episodes.
Yeah,
So
I think we'll have
we
probably a few episodes between now and Christmas, and then probably like week of Christmas. We may have a couple weeks we miss here and there around the holidays, but
yeah,
the exciting thing is, after Christmas and New Year's, we'll be gearing up to come
yeah,
back at you full force as everybody's minds are shifting back to turkeys and
yeah.
developing some new and interesting series
Hmm.
that'll be more hard hitting on the science again.
Yeah, yeah. We've got a lot of really good stuff planned. So thanks
And around that
everybody.
same time frame, we'll have students, or I'll at least have a couple finishing up these projects that we've already talked about and
Yeah,
having more data to share and some actual final results.
yeah. That'll be cool. I kind of feel like maybe we ought to focus some episodes on interviewing students that have been doing a lot of this work. That'd be
Yeah,
cool.
yeah,
I know, we both have students working on things. I don't have any that are near finishing at the moment, but you do, and then various other researchers around the nation, many of which we've talked to, have grad students that are wrapping up really good work. So that'd be cool.
Absolutely.
But without all the interest out there, our listenership, all the feedback, all the support, we wouldn't be able to do it, and I don't think we'd be motivated to stick to it either. Because it's been a lot of work, but
it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, but it's fun work. It's good work, and I think it keeps us sharp too.
Yeah, it's definitely done that for me. As sharp as you could get me. Yeah,
like old bush hog blade.
Yeah, I was going to ask you actually, knowing that you were in the stadium with that upset. I wondered, did that really provoke you into going out and killing something like some trees? The reason I bring that up, I did participate in some forest stand improvement on my land. Did a lot of tree killing, killed a lot of privet, and I had an old axe that I've been doing that with since my days of grad school. Used the same little hatchet.
Yeah.
And it's seen better days, but it's kind of one of those situations where you get it as sharp as you can, but getting it sharp is a different thing than sharp as you can.
It's sharp. It's relatively sharp, we'll say.
Yeah, it's sharper than it was. So, but yeah, that was a lot of fun. Got out and did some filming, so we'll be putting some content out through social media showing different forest stand improvement techniques and before and after stuff. So been getting a lot of questions about that. So I thought, why not do that during the middle of deer season on the only week you get to go home to deer hunt?
That's dedication.
Yeah, good stuff.
All right.
Well, I guess till next time, folks. We really appreciate the support.
Yeah, and a lot of you have already left us reviews, but if you haven't already, make sure to please leave us one, because that helps get the word out there.
Yeah, and share the podcast with your friends and family. All the support has been really helpful to get us, get our voices extended out. Maybe we'll make a few more turkeys.
That's right. Wild Turkey Science is part of the Natural Resources University podcast network and is made possible by Turkeys for Tomorrow, a grassroots organization dedicated to the wild turkey. To learn more about TFT, check out turkeysfortomorrow.org.